Michael McDonald is going to be joining us. Isn't that right, Tom?
I'm open. There he is.
There he is.
Hey, Michael.
Hi.
Hey, guys. How are you?
It's great seeing you.
How are you, sir?
I love the book. I want to start with kind of a serious question.
I want a bologna sandwich. Is what I
At the end of the book, you're talking about singing Danny Boy, and because when I listened to the book and you had to narrate it, have you ever done a recording of Danny Boy?
I have, actually, with, I did a couple. One never came out. It was just a demo I did of it on ukulele, believe it or not. But for reasons I'm not even sure. But the I'm embarrassed because I'm trying to remember the artist's name. It was a young lady out of Newfoundland who was a fiddle player and amazing artist, and I did a version of it with her that was basically kind of the arrangement I came up with on ukulele, more or less, and it was fun to do that kind of. It was a very folky kind of a version of it,
It's because it almost brought tears to my eyes. It was so beautiful. After going through the whole book, it's like you become a friend of Michael McDonald listening to you narrate it. There's a funny part of the book where you're talking about the difficulty of recording Peg with Steely Dan. Was it more irritating having to read your book over the course of 6 days than deal with
absolutely? It was absolutely the worst thing I've ever had to do. Was read the book. And thank God. I mean, Paul. God bless him. He was there from the beginning to
Paul
the
Reiser,
end.
the comedian.
Yeah, Paul Reiser, much more responsible for this whole thing than I am. And he was even there when I was reading and coaxing me along. He was directing the whole thing, him and another fella, and they kept me, awake during the whole reading because it was 6 days of hell.
Because then you get you're probably going, I'm so sick of talking about Michael McDonald.
Oh, it sounded like Frankenstein, when I was reading it.
There's a great scene in one of the books about Elvis where Elvis is recording, and they're sitting outside with his friends during a break, and the guy calls, or the producer calls, you got to come back in, and Elvis goes, God, I'm so sick of being that guy. And I guess I think reading about yourself that long might get a little bit hard. One of the funniest scenes in the book is when we refer to you as Mr. Michael McDonald, but you were always Mike McDonald, and you didn't become Michael until you were on stage one. Can you tell that story quickly?
Yeah, the only time I had been called Michael up to this point was by the nuns at St. John and James Grade School, and that was, the last person I can remember calling me Michael, or my mother when she was mad at me. But I was my first night playing with the Doobie Brothers in New Orleans, not in New Orleans, in Shreveport, Louisiana, amid calls from the audience of, where's Tom, because I was singing some of his songs. Wow. Pat, Simmons decided it was maybe a good time to introduce me to the audience. And he introduced me as Michael McDonald on keyboards. And from that point on, some reviewer the next day who reviewed the show, made the comment, and some guy, Michael McDonald, was singing some of Tom's songs. So it stuck. From that point on, it seemed like every time Pat introduced me, he introduced me as Michael McDonald, and the reviewer, whoever reviewed the show that night, would the next day refer to me that way. So it kind of was a moniker that stuck with me from that point on.
What do your friends call you?
Most of my friends call me Mike.
Yes, you can,
among other things. Sure.
Michael McDonald is a brilliant recording artist, and his book is really interesting. A lot of family stuff. And I didn't know anything about your background. I just knew you were from St. Louis. But the book is called What a Fool Believes. And as you mentioned, written with Paul Reiser. We happened to be talking to Paul a few months ago, and he mentioned he had this book coming out with Michael McDonald. I flipped. I couldn't believe it. I'm trying to remember this exactly. I think you were talking about the song Yamo Be There. If I'm not mistaken, it was kind of like a nonsense thing that you were doing to sort of fit it into the song.
Yeah, we didn't really have a title per se, except that we were in typical fashion when we were writing a song, we would just kind of mumble anything until we got around to writing a lyric. And so Yamo Be There was kind of what we would mumble when we got to the chorus, James and I, and then we thought about, well, what the hell is the title going to be, actually, and if we had to actually say something, and then James kind of said, rationalized, he goes, well, it is a kind of a gospel song, because that's kind of where we were headed with it. And he said, and it's kind of like the ancient Hebrew reference to God, Yahweh. So maybe we just leave it, Yamo Be There. So,
it worked.
Yeah, we were lazy. We couldn't think of anything better, so we went with it. And Quincy liked it, so that was the acid test. If we got to pass on Quincy, we were good.
Yeah, one of the things that bothered me in the book is I guess every time you see Quincy Jones, he says to you, "Well, I could have made your first album better."
Yeah, no, well, and no doubt,
I doubt. No, that first album, that is one of my all-time top 10 great records. That is a brilliant album.
Yeah, that was a missed opportunity for me. One that I regret is not being able to work. It wasn't, entirely my fault. Quincy was just so busy at that time in his life. It was really basically when he stepped into the film business and started to produce films himself, Color Purple and all those things. So, our roads came together, but quickly separated, and by virtue of things that were out of our control.
Now, one of the aspects of your book is getting yourself clean, and there are some pretty funny stories. One of them involving Walter Becker from Steely Dan, but
and the Police.
I love that. I love that.
But my favorite story in the book is a real quick one. It involves Elizabeth Taylor. Can you tell that one quickly? It was so funny.
Oh, well, thank you. It's some of the stuff is funny because it's true. I'm not that witty, really. It's just telling it. It turns out to be funnier than even I remember. But we were playing at a huge event. It was kind of like the age of events, like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame kind of things. And this was Night of 100 Stars, and it was at Radio City Music Hall, I believe, in New York City. And it was like Scrappy's birthday party, the old cartoon. Now, most people won't know what the hell I'm talking about, but every star of the day was attending this thing. Joel McRae was there, for God's sake.
Oh my God.
Everybody you can imagine.
Yeah.
And Lauren Bacall and Elizabeth Taylor, believe it or not, were there. And the guy that was producing the show knew how long it was going to take, first of all, to pull this thing off. It started in the morning and it didn't end until somewhere around midnight. And we were all trapped, except for those of us who could escape back to the hotel, time to time, in this backstage area of those floors of dressing rooms, make a long story short, the guy did a really good job of keeping no alcohol or drugs or anything backstage, because he knew that the whole thing would go to hell in a handbasket. If he didn't, So and it was amazing the people who were kind of starting to have a problem with that, And so this guy came to me, a young guy, kind of like a typical of the people back there handling some of the artists, and he said, Miss Taylor and Miss McCall would like to meet you. Just wondering if you could come down and say hello. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I knew who he meant, and I was, saying, gosh, Elizabeth Taylor and Lauren Bacall. I'm thinking, well, they must be Doobie Brothers fans. What else could it be? Yeah. So I follow this guy down some elevators into to a floor that was pretty much quartered off for just them, and I go in, and here's, of all people, these Hollywood legends, still beautiful women, Lauren Bacall and Elizabeth Taylor, and he comes up, he goes, Miss Taylor, this is Michael McDonald. And she looks up at me from sitting down, from a sitting position, and she kind of does this, like, come here, we'll come down close so I can, whisper something to you, And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is unbelievable. As I lean down and I put my ear to her, and she leans in, she says, I heard it. You're the guy that can find us some booze. So, I took me a second, I kind of regrouped. I said, yeah, I could probably do that. So that led to me leaving the building and going across the street and, to finding a liquor store and coming back with a little bottle of Jack Daniels or something.
Maybe you're open. Hey, can you sing? I keep forgetting.
I was surprised that was the whole crux of our conversation. But
we're speaking with the great musical artist Michael McDonald, and he's got a terrific book out there. And the audio book, there's a bonus. I'm trying to remember. It's kind of a conversation with Paul Reiser at the end. And there's a couple of this that really makes it worth, even if you've got the book, get that just to hear that. It's a great conversation. And Paul Reiser, I didn't realize was so musical. And you guys you're good friends, and he really helped you get your life story out. And your life story, it's so interesting. A lot of family stuff, a lot of ups and downs, and there's a love story in there, and a lot of hope. And you talk a lot about your songwriting and your music, but you're a very humble. And it's you sort of didn't realize how good you were, I guess, coming up. You're in a bunch of bar bands, and then you get these phone calls. You're playing for 4 people one night. The next night, you're in front of thousands. Great stuff.
Well, thank you. I think what Paul was really, like I say, the great encourager in this thing, because all through the thing, I kept asking him, do you think, are we getting anywhere with this? I mean, is this even a story? And, nobody died, went to prison, it just doesn't seem like, all that great of a story to me. And he kept, telling me, no, he goes, at some point, as we're writing, this thing will kind of kick in and start writing itself. And the things that are important will surprise you. There'll be the simplest things that you wouldn't really give much credence to. But as you write them down, in his experience, he was explaining that those things will become the things that people relate to the most. And I hope that happened. I hope people saw their own story in it, because it's really a lot of just life stuff that isn't necessarily, lack of confidence or here and there, but and then bouts with your own ego here and there. That yin and yang that we all go through in life. Where our perspective of reality is usually never that good. But in spite of it, life kind of opens itself up to us if we let it. And I towards the middle of writing the book, I started to really feel like the story was writing itself, and I was really having less to do with engineering the thing. And thank God for Paul, because he was editing the whole thing the whole way we went. And by the time we handed it in, I think it's unusual probably too that the story, they didn't have to do a whole lot of editing, thanks to Paul kind of overseeing the thing as we wrote it and moving things around. We did a lot of cutting and pasting as we went. And there were moments where, he would say, this needs to go much later in the story. And we hadn't even written that part of the story yet. So I would go, what later? What story? We're not even there yet. But he knew, his instincts were that this was something that we should hold back on. And so a lot of that editing self-editing that we did along the way really paid off. And when we handed it in, they did a great job, don't get me wrong, of editing it also, and made it a better book, I think, too. But Paul really led the charge on all that,
We're speaking with Michael McDonald. I was kind of wondering, this is a story, a question I should say from Ace, our engineer here. He wanted to know if you still get residuals from the TV show What's Happening.
I don't think we ever did, but we certainly got a lot of mileage out of it.
We like to ask the serious questions. Yeah. I was kind of wondering, in the process of writing this, did you ever stumble on any stories of your own life that, hey, maybe this would be a song? Or did you maybe think I had this lyric, maybe I should sit down at the piano and try to make something out of this? Anything not about the book that came out of the book?
Well, I might write a song about bologna sandwiches. I'm not sure.
That'd be great. Should we have him, before we let Mr. McDonald go, should we have him explain the bologna sandwich reference?
Well, his mom, you had an interesting mother and father, yeah.
Yeah, my mom, pretty much anyone who came into the house, she would follow them around with a bologna sandwich in her hand, trying to get them to eat it, and as a gesture of hospitality. And, that was kind of our go-to as a family when, after arguments, certainly after church or, whatever it was, they broke out the bologna sandwiches. And I have friends who have been calling me since the book was out. Just about everyone she ever offered a bologna sandwich to has called me to, I couldn't believe you wrote about that. Your mom used to try to get me to eat those bologna sandwiches.
And occasionally fairly famous people would be associated with your Bob. One more thing before we let you go. I had an argument with this guy I work with at the gym. One of your songs was actually part of a hip-hop song. And I'm sure you're aware that I guess you had to give them permission, presumably, years ago from your first solo album. And what is the rap song that it turns into?
Warren G.
Regulate.
Yeah. How does that work when they take one of your licks and turn it into a song? Do they have to get your permission, right?
Yeah, They were nice enough to call and ask us, and we made some minor deal, to have them use the riff. It was really just a piano riff from the song, that they used, and then he kind of wrote his own song over that. My kids love that version much more than they love mine.
But I had to convince this guy, no, this is a song from the great Michael McDonald. But he had no idea, and so then I forced him to go over to the stereo in the gym and play that one. Lastly, I know you're a dog guy. Now, at present, do you have dogs?
Yeah, we have two. A little Chihuahua. She's like Satan incarnate. And we have a golden who's, he's a golden, he's
the best.
sweetheart,
You're in a room with a bunch of people with golden retrievers.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Michael McDonald's book, written with Paul Reiser. The book is once again called What a Fool Believes. It's a great read if you're a fan of Mr. McDonald or the Doobie Brothers. There's a bunch of great stuff about Steely Dan and about Michael being in a bar band, like I said, playing for a handful of people one night, then a few nights later playing for huge crowds. Thanks so much for your time. I just love the book. I love your music, and it's so kind of you to take the time to talk to us.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
And we'll look forward to seeing you. I know you guys are on stage with the Doobies. I think it's in Syracuse coming up in a couple of weeks, and then Allentown. Then you're up in Canada pretty soon.
Yep.
And if you're near Atlantic City, look for Mr. McDonald and the Doobie Brothers. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Great pleasure.
Thanks.
Oh, wow. It's a great book. So much fun.
And what's the name of it?
It's called What a Fool Believes. There's that great Michael McDonald song, I think, with Kenny Loggins, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
And the story behind that is Kenny Loggins was knocking on Michael McDonald's door.
Right.
And Michael was playing What a Fool Believes, kind of the first part of it. And it was the first time they'd met. And
he didn't have a lyric, did he?
And he didn't have any. And Kenny, and Michael goes, I hope you could write some good stuff. And he goes, What was that you were just playing? Let's go ahead and do that. Yeah. And then next thing you know, Grammy and all sorts of stuff.